Hey, welcome to our explainer. When we think about the British Empire in India, we usually picture swords and cannons. But what if the most powerful weapon wasn't steel at all, but ink and paper? Today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow that paper trail to uncover a story of conquest by treaty. So, how do you conquer a subcontinent? That's a massive question, right? And the answer, it turns out, isn't just about military might. Sure, battles were fought and won, but the real game, the one for keeps, often happened after the cannons went silent.
Yeah, the real key to understanding this whole period, it's buried in the fine print of the documents signed after all the fighting stopped. I'm talking about the treaties. And look, these weren't just about making peace. Not at all. They were carefully crafted instruments of power.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We'll start with a key concept, then we'll jump into three crucial conflicts: the wars against the Kingdom of Mysore, the Maratha Confederacy, and the Sikh Empire. And by the end, you'll see how these seemingly separate events all click together to form this single, pretty powerful blueprint for an empire.
All right, first up, wars, treaties, and power. Our focus here is right at that intersection of military action and, well, paperwork. We're going to look at how the results of these wars got written down into legal documents and what those documents really did for the British East India Company.
Okay, this right here is the core idea for our entire discussion today, the strategic treaty. So it's not about creating some kind of lasting peace. No. Think of it as a tool. It's about hitting pause on the fighting, but on terms that completely stack the deck in your favor for the next round. Let's see how this actually played out.
All right, so our first deep dive takes us down to southern India, to the really formidable Kingdom of Mysore. Now, this was one of the first major powers that truly, and I mean truly, challenged the ambitions of the East India Company.
And you can see right away this wasn't some quick little skirmish. We're talking about a long, drawn-out struggle, a multi-generational conflict that stretched over a quarter of a century. Each of these wars was like a separate chapter in a much, much longer story of attrition.
And just look at the pattern here. It's so clear. One war, one treaty. Another war, another treaty. It's like a perfect staircase, isn't it? Each treaty is just a calculated step, leading from one conflict right on into the next one.
And that's the absolute key. The Treaty of Madras in 1769, it didn't really solve anything. And then you get to the Treaty of Srinapatam in 1792, which basically forced Mysore to give up half its land and pay a huge penalty. Those are terms that just scream, we'll be back to fight about this later.
Okay, so that's Mysore. But what happens when your opponent isn't just one unified kingdom? That's exactly the puzzle the British faced with the Marathas, a sprawling, complex confederacy of states. This was going to require a whole different, more intricate strategy. Look at this. The first war dragged on for 7 years. But what's really interesting is that long gap afterwards. That wasn't a time of peace and quiet. No, think of it more like a Cold War. It was 2 decades of intense political maneuvering, making and breaking alliances, all before the next big fight.
So you see, this is already different from the Mysore situation. Here you've got multiple treaties for a single war. Take the Treaty of Surat. It actually kicked off the first war because the British used it to back one Maratha faction against another. They were using treaties not just to end wars, but to start them on their own terms. It's a classic divide-and-conquer strategy.
All right, our final case study takes us to the Punjab region and the powerful Sikh Empire. They were pretty much the last major force standing in the way of the East India Company's complete control over the subcontinent.
Now, compared to those decades-long slogs with Mysore and the Marathas, this was, wow, lightning fast, over in just a few months. You can really see that by this point, the British military and political machine, after decades of practice, had become just brutally efficient.
And this is where the strategy just becomes crystal clear. Look at that. 2 major treaties in a single year. This wasn't about taking a break or catching their breath. This was a rapid-fire sequence of moves designed to completely neutralize the Sikh Empire before it had any chance to recover.
That quote just nails it, doesn't it? The first treaty, the Treaty of Lahore, ended the fighting and grabbed valuable land. The second, the Treaty of Byron-Wall, came just months later and basically installed a British official in the capital, seizing control of the government from the inside. It was a classic 1-2 punch, delivered not with fists, but with fountain pens.
Okay, so we've looked at Mysore, the Marathas, and the Sikhs. When you put these 3 conflicts side by side, you're not just looking at a series of isolated wars. You're looking at a playbook, a blueprint.
And here it is, the blueprint. It's a simple, repeatable 4-step cycle. You fight, you sign a treaty, You use that treaty to weaken your opponent, and then you start the next fight from a much stronger position. The treaty is the crucial pivot point. It's where the gains from one war are locked down, and the advantages for the next one are secured.
I mean, just look at the sheer amount of paperwork here. It's kind of staggering. Across just these 3 conflicts, we're talking about 9 major treaties. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate strategy. It was a mix of traditional warfare and what you might call lawfare, using legal documents as weapons to get what you want.
So, if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. These treaties were stepping stones, not endpoints. The treaties the East India Company was signing, they weren't designed to create peace. Nope, they were designed to create an advantage. Each and every one was just another step on the path of the next fight and ultimately to controlling the whole subcontinent.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question, right? We tend to think of diplomacy and war as complete opposites. But what this history shows us is that sometimes they can be 2 sides of the same coin, just different tools for the same job. So it really makes you wonder, when is a treaty an act of peace? And when is it just another weapon of war? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.